Coming up to 17:15 GMT, you're fired. It's becoming an increasingly common feature of European working life to hear variations on that phrase, the job for life being pretty much a thing of the past now. But it's bad enough hearing you're fired in a face-to-face meeting with your manager, a human resources person, and maybe a union representative, but few people, especially soldiers with more than 20 years service, expect to get the sacking news by email. The British Armed Forces Minister today called on the Ministry of Defence to apologise to 38 warrant officers who were fired by email and told to start planning their resettlement. One of them was actually on the front line in Afghanistan at the time. It's raised the question of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable when it comes to methods of sacking people. This is Steve from London, who was recently fired over Skype.
I would absolutely have preferred it if he'd done it face-to-face, yeah, because it was easier for him to kind of not have to sit in the same room and experience, obviously all the emotions that you go through when you do lose a job. I think that was the part that he didn't want to deal with, and it was perhaps easier to talk to us over Skype, and if things got rowdy or heated, he could just sort of click off the conversation, which he did actually do. There was actually a range of reaction in the room, and there was 4 of us all sitting together. I didn't have much to say because I was actually more interested to hear what he had to say to us. My day-to-day manager was very vocal and argued contractually and morally about the injustice of being fired over Skype. I think I'd like to be fired one-on-one, and I'd like to be fired by my immediate superior, not someone who I hardly ever see. And I'd actually like to be fired by more than one person. I know it sounds strange, but the whole idea of not being made to feel like it's me versus them, the fact that you can sit down with a couple of your colleagues and actually have a conversation and sort of understand why something is happening, I think that's really important. This is my career and I work very closely with everybody, to then sort of feel like there's machinations afoot that I'm not particularly included enough, having given a lot of time and effort and sort of emotional energy to the company, is not great. So yeah, those are the only things that I'd ask for.
That was Steve from London, feeling slightly bruised by his method of firing. Kerry Cooper is a professor of organisational psychology at the University of Lancaster in northern England. Welcome to the programme, Professor. Presumably you feel the military personnel's pain and the way they were sacked, do you?
Oh, absolutely. Totally appalling human resource management policy practice. You can't believe it, can you? I think we're seeing more of this, by the way. We're seeing more texting, Skyping, email, redundancies. I mean, it's just getting out of hand. And you know what I think it is? I think it's that this is something that managers don't like to do. So if you can use social networking in whatever form you have, so you don't have to eyeball, face-to-face tell people the bad news, then you try to do it this way. Most good companies, public sector bodies and so on would not do that, wouldn't even contemplate doing that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's something that managers have to do more and more, and maybe they haven't got the time to see everyone in person in an age of mass layoffs.
I don't think it's the time. I think it's the emotional energy. What I think they're worried about is they just don't like face-to-face to tell people that. HR doesn't like it either. Human resource management departments don't like face-to-face to tell people this, but that's part and parcel of their job. We have to look at the human being. You're dealing with a human being who feels, the job loss is a real rejecting event for them. You are, in the UK, we use the word redundant. I mean, listen to the word itself. So I think it's important that actually, if you have to let people go, you do it with dignity, you do it face-to-face. And, by the way, for example, in the military, which usually has a good track record, by the way, of leading people for periods of months, of preparing them for a job loss, rather than, saying you're just going to have to prepare yourself. And really, that's what most good organizations do, because they leave a very negative legacy if they don't help their ex-employees, particularly people who've been serving for a long time, if they don't actually help them to try to find another job.
Well, what is the humane way to fire someone? Most people will see straight through all those trite HR phrases about this is not a comment on you personally and so on. Clearly it is.
Oh, I'm afraid what you have to do is just really be honest. But what you do is you do the backup services, don't you? What you do is you say, look, as well as I do, we're getting rid of 10% of people. And you try, I think, to help the human being understand why. Because we're getting rid of that and we're taking R&D and we're putting it into Germany now. We have to do that. The costs are cheaper. You give the person a kind of explanation so they don't feel it's just them. that actually the job's been made redundant. You don't do the American model. You don't, what the Americans do is they call it right sizing. They use all sorts of expressions.
Don't like that at all.
Oh, no, it's horrendous. And I just heard an interesting one where an individual was told they were made redundant. And I'm afraid they said, we're introducing an involuntary career event here.
Horrible. Thank you
Is that
very
horrible?
much. Thanks for coming on the program, Professor Kerry Cooper from Lancaster University. Now.